Hello, I'm Dr. Diane Webster. This is a story about young Dr. Alice Werner. Long hours at work and lack of sleep can drive her to want to end it all. Listen to the very end to find out if Dr. Alice can turn things around. It's called 120 Hours. Footscray, Melbourne, March 1979. 120 hours a week. The hospital administration team had brought all the new interns into a room on our first orientation day at the hospital in January and asked us to each sign a contract to be paid to work a flat rate for everyone, 120 hours a week. We weren't allowed to leave the meeting until we had all signed. We thought this sounded more than reasonable. Even if we worked less than 120 hours a week, we would still be paid for that time. So that sounded good. Surely it wouldn't even be possible to work more than 120 hours a week, we thought. This is where we were all wrong. Later that day, we got our rosters. It seems we were rostered from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., 2 days a week, and those were the short days. Then, 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next morning, that's 24 hours straight, 2 days a week. Another 2 days a week, we were rostered from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 14-hour days. Now here's the surprise. Every second week, we were rostered from 8 a.m. Friday morning to 6 p.m. Monday night continuously for the whole weekend. That's 4 days and nights straight. On the alternate weeks, when we weren't rostered the whole weekend, we still needed to come in and do the ward round for our unit on Saturday morning. This meant completing all the paperwork and order all the tests for the unit patients, which usually took from 8 a.m. to 12 midday. If you were rostered for neurosurgery, for instance, the ward round started at 6 a.m. every morning, and we as interns in the unit were expected to be there. My first rotation for the year, fresh out of medical school, was anaesthetics. When we weren't rostered to theatre to assist our allocated anaesthetist for surgeries, we were rostered to casualty or the wards for the after hours and on weekends. It took about 2.5 months of this roster for me to become suicidal. I was tremendously tired, but I found I often couldn't sleep when I was off duty. When we were rostered on at night, we were expected to do the paperwork for admitting all the new patients to the hospital and also attend, if we were called to the wards, for replacing IVs or writing up medications. I started taking sleeping tablets to help me to get to sleep, but I found they only worked for about 2 hours. I found I had visions of patients vomiting blood or coming into the emergency department cut up with razor blades, or having to do a death certificate on a patient burnt to death in a house fire, to name a few specifics. The patient's traumas from the day just kept haunting me at night. This progressed to me thinking at night when I couldn't sleep about how I could end it all. I found myself dreading going to work each day. As I drove along the highway coming up to the hospital gates, I would fantasize about driving straight past and not going in today, or in fact never going in again. But I told myself I had gone through 6 hard years of medical school, and I was not even a fully registered doctor in the state of Victoria yet. All first-year doctors, or interns as we were called, only had conditional registration until they had satisfactorily completed 12 months as interns in a state hospital. I just couldn't let all that time I had been studying, practicing and doing exams go to waste. So each day I turned the car into the hospital car park and just went in. And I spent sleepless nights in the early hours of the morning planning my death. I was rostered to the right department, anaesthetics, to plan a minimally painful suicide. All I would need was to slip some supplies from the anaesthetist trolley into my white coat pocket. I would need needles and syringes, a sedative so I would slip away to sleep, and a drug to paralyse my diaphragm so I couldn't change my mind. And this would definitely stop me breathing. This was a way I could escape from the hell I found myself in. I would do it all in the on-call room at the hospital, so it would be the least possible inconvenience for everyone, especially my family. I could never do it at home and present my mother with such a mess. My mother. How could I do this to my mother? I thought. She will be heartbroken. This was the turning point for me. I hadn't breathed a word of any of my trauma to a living soul up until now. I was a doctor, and doctors are not weak. We can put up with the sight of blood and people being cut up, maimed, injured. So I hadn't told a soul how bad I was feeling and that I was having trouble sleeping until now. "Mum," I blurted out when I was next back home. "I've been thinking about killing myself. I've got it all planned, exactly how to do it. And I know this is really bad." "We've got to get you to a psychiatrist immediately," my ever-pragmatic ex-nurse mother replied. "I'll go and call Dr. Siri." That's our GP who had looked after us since we were children. "And I'll get a referral to a good psychiatrist," she added. Before the day was out, I had a referral and appointment with the psychiatrist for the upcoming Saturday morning. Mum insisted on taking me. I couldn't go earlier, I said, even though it was only Tuesday, because I couldn't take a day off work, as I would be letting my colleagues down. They would all have to do extra work to cover for me, and everyone was already worked to the bone. Saturday morning, 11 a.m. I'm in the psychiatrist's office, answering a lot of questions about my childhood. "I had a totally normal childhood," I said. "No trauma. I'm a first-year doctor at Footscray Hospital and we're rostered for very long hours," I went on. The psychiatrist took lots of notes, never looking up from his file. Finally, after about 40 minutes of me answering his questions, he put his pen down and looked at me and said, "Well, you're not mad. You're not psychotic. You're actually normal. Probably most first-year doctors go through what you're going through. I don't think you'll actually do it. Kill yourself, that is. You just need to relax more. I'll give you some relaxation tapes to listen to." He showed me out of his office and I returned to Mum, who was patiently waiting in the doctor's reception area. "He says I'm not mad, Mum, just normal. I just need some relaxation tapes." I had no more suicidal thoughts after that visit. I was relieved that I was deemed normal by the psychiatrist and a little disappointed that to be given just relaxation tapes because I didn't think they would do anything for me. When was I going to have time to listen to them anyway? So what did fix me? I think it was talking to my mother, confiding in someone who truly cared about me instead of thinking I could fix myself, which I clearly couldn't. We all need someone to talk to, that we trust, and who has only our very best interests at heart. The work at the hospital was just as hard and long subsequently, but maybe I was coping better because I started to get used to it. I practiced leaving my thoughts about work at work, and I stopped bringing them home with me. But I think really it was Mum. She cared enough to listen. She took me seriously and took me to the psychiatrist to get the relaxation tapes. I can't even remember listening to those tapes, but maybe I did. But thanks, Mum, for being there for me. I wouldn't be here now if you hadn't been. That's the end of the story. Thanks for listening. And for more short stories, go to my YouTube channel and read my novel, which is a collection of short stories about the life and times of Dr. Alice. It's called 4 Ways to Die at Riverside Towers. I hope you have a calm and happy day today. and we'll see you soon.